Kansas City. If you have not heard about this story, you're going to hear about it now. We're going to get the heavy story out of the way first, because this one is heavier compared to the other ones. And it may be difficult for some of you to hear, but we got to talk about this. A 16-year-old boy, his name was Ralph. He was going to a home where he thought his brothers were. So he was going to pick up his brothers. He accidentally went to the wrong house. He rang the doorbell and the homeowner shot him in the head. Now, luckily, he survived. This story could have been an entirely different thing if he did not. But he survived, and that means that he is going to get the opportunity to really come forward during this case about his story. Oftentimes, that is not the case, and I'm going to tell you about an example of one tonight where it did not work out that way. But what made this happen? Let's go ahead and get started with this clip here from CNN. When this was first announced that this teenage boy was shot in the head, at this point in time, what you have to understand is that for whatever reason, the press was not willing to release the homeowner's name. I had a big issue with that. And I was talking to people about that via social media, because why should you wait to release the perpetrator's name, but you have no problem putting the victim's name out there all in the open? They have released his name now, but I think that is because of more push that came from the people. You don't need to protect the perpetrator. Let's get into this clip.
Calls for justice across the country after a Kansas City teen went to the wrong home to pick up his younger brothers, and the homeowner shot him. 16-year-old Ralph Yarl is recovering in the hospital in stable condition. His family describes him as a typical high schooler who loves to play the bass clarinet. He has been looking forward to starting college and majoring in chemical engineering. Police say Yarl's family say that he was given the address 115th Terrace, but he mistakenly went to a home at 115th Street. And
let me pause here for a second. Anyone could easily make this mistake. Same number address, but then you have one that says Terrace and you have one that says Street. Anyone could make this mistake. And for the people who have been making excuses for the perpetrator, saying, well, he should have gone to the right house, that doesn't give someone the right to just shoot you. Let's be real about that. Let's go on.
Instead, the shooter has been released, and there is sparking protest nationwide right now and outrage nationwide. CNN's Camila Bernal live for us in Los Angeles with more on this. Good morning to you, Camila. What is the status on this investigation?
Good morning, Don. Authorities say more is needed to go forward, and they need a statement from Ralph Yarl. He is doing well. He's in the hospital. He's recovering. But the family says that this is a long road, especially when it comes to his mental and his emotional health. This is a teenager that is being described as friendly and well-mannered. He loves music, and the family says plays multiple instruments, always had one in hand. He was dreaming about graduating and going to West Africa. All of this, of course, is going to be a lot more difficult now because he went to 115th Street instead of Terrace. He was just a block away from his brothers when he was shot.
Yep.
The Kansas City community protesting on Sunday after 16-year-old Ralph Yarl was shot as he was trying to pick up his siblings last week. Police say Yarl accidentally went to the wrong address, where he was shot and seriously wounded by the homeowner. Officers arrived at the scene after a neighbor called 911 and took the homeowner immediately into custody.
Our heart goes out to the juvenile victim, and more than anything, to make sure that this child and this child's family knows that there are people working hard, a number of people working hard, to make sure there is justice for this person.
We need to pause here for just a second. Did you notice what they're doing? Notice how they wouldn't mention his name. They referred to him as the homeowner, but they had no problem mentioning the victim's name. This is something I've seen happen oftentimes in mainstream media. I've always had a problem with this because I feel like they're trying to protect the perpetrator. And if you shoot someone point blank in the head for ringing the doorbell, You don't need to be protected from the mainstream media. Now, there are some media pundits that are saying that he tried to forcefully enter the home. That has actually been debunked. This boy did not enter the house. And the fact that they just told you that the homeowner shot him in the head and a neighbor called 911 and he was immediately taken into custody, that tells you that after he shot him, he sat right back down, had no problem with what he did. It's not like he tried to escape. It's not like he shot him and tried to get in his car and ride off or anything like that. He sat right there. And he wasn't the one that called 911. The neighbor was the one that called 911. So he had no intention on actually trying to save this boy's life or to see if he was dead or alive. That is the message I want you to really focus on here. He really did not care at all. How heartless and cruel people can be. This is what America has come to. You can't even make the mistake and go to the wrong house anymore.
Homeowner, who has not been identified, was released after 24 hours pending further investigation.
And why was he released after 24 hours after he was already taken into custody when they knew that he did what he did? I want to remind you that someone like Julian Assange was not released. Julian Assange didn't kill anybody, but they considered him to be more of a threat than this man right here who shot this kid in the head. Make the comparison. Make the comparison here. They let him go.
The police department says they're waiting to obtain a formal statement from the victim and further forensic evidence.
I want everyone to know that I'm listening, and I understand the concern that we are receiving from the community. The information that we have now, it does not say that it's racially motivated. That's still an active investigation. But as a chief of police, I do recognize the racial components of this case. I do recognize and understand the community's concern.
Jarl's aunt says her nephew loves music and is a section leader in his marching band.
If she understands the community's concern, then why did they release him after 24 hours? What if he would have shot someone else?
She says his goal is to attend Texas A&M University to study chemical engineering. Civil rights attorneys Lee Merritt and Benjamin Crump are representing the victim and his family and demanding swift action, and are calling the shooting horrendous and unjustifiable.
As a mother of 3 children, this enrages me.
And protesters gathering Sunday outside the home where Jarl was shot, demanding justice.
He is alive. He is healing. Yes. So I just want to tell you thank you for being here, because my nephew is alive.
And the homeowner was released. State law says you either have to charge someone or release them after 24 hours. And authorities here say they need more evidence. They want to talk to this teenager and they want to continue this investigation. So he was released, and it's part of the reason why people are so upset this morning and why they're asking for justice. Dawn.
I just want to chime in here for a second and say this. The neighbor called the police. The neighbor was the one that called 911. I'm not quite sure what more information they needed to keep him and to charge him. So that's the part that really bothers me. Now, I have another clip here. This is from MSNBC, where they finally come forward with the homeowner's name. So this gentleman, Andrew Lester, he's in his 80s. I hear so many people on social media right now trying to make excuses for this man. The thing is this: what kind of country do we live in now where you can't even make the mistake of ringing someone's doorbell and it's the wrong doorbell? What was he so afraid of? And why are we so afraid of each other? Is what it's come to in this country? Is this what it has come to, where we are afraid of each other? And if that's the case, I blame mainstream media. I told you this is what they do. They have us so divided and so fearful of each other to prevent us from coming together. Where if someone shows up on your doorstep, your first response is to shoot them. What has happened to this country? Let's get into this one.
An 84-year-old white Kansas City man is now facing 2 felony charges and, if found guilty, life in prison after a shooting that has grabbed the nation's attention. According to family and lawyers for 16-year-old black teenager Ralph Yarl, it happened when he was trying to pick up his brothers one night last week. They say he accidentally rang the wrong doorbell, and the man inside shot him in the head and the arm. He had to run to 3 different houses before someone would help him. That has led to protests over the weekend and a massive outpouring of support on social media. A GoFundMe for Yarl's hospital bill has surpassed $2 million.
And why did he have to run to 3 houses before someone would actually help him? You know why? Because we have been trained to believe by the media that we should be afraid of each other. That's why. That's why people didn't open their door for that young boy and help him. Because we've been taught to fear each other. We've been taught to fear each other. By the way, the house he's supposed to go to was just 1 block over. We've been taught to fear each other. We've been taught to fear our neighbors. And we've been taught to trust the politicians who are the ones who are really screwing all of us over. 16 years old. Let's go on.
He has been released from the hospital, thank goodness, but has a long recovery ahead. Tonight, I am joined by Glenn Rice, investigative reporter for the Kansas City Star. Glenn, we understand President Biden has spoke with Ralph Yarl's family. What can you tell us about this young man and what really happened? The more I see it covered, I keep thinking I must be missing something. How could this possibly happen? Think about all the times in my life as a teenager, I rang people's doorbell to sell hoagies and cookies and go Christmas caroling. He was just an innocent kid ringing a bell.
I used to have to sell, for those of you that have been in band, like I was in band. So this little boy's story, really resonated with me. I was like, oh man, he was in the band. I was in band and we used to have to sell these candy bars called America's Best Chocolate, something like that, or America's Greatest Chocolate. You guys know those candy bars I'm talking about. They're like $1. We used to have to knock on doors to sell those candy bars, right? When I was a kid, we used to knock on doors for trick or treat and ask people for candy. A couple of years ago in Columbia, or I think it was Casey, South Carolina. It was out in the boonies in South Carolina. I remember this is right before I moved to Boston. Kids were going trick-or-treating. It was on the local news. And one man opened the door and he fired on the trick-or-treaters. That happened in South Carolina. People have lost it. Seriously have lost it. You can't do these things anymore. Parents can't let the kids go trick-or-treating by themselves anymore because someone may shoot them when they open the door. You can't go knock on someone's door to sell candy bars because you may get shot in the head. You can't accidentally make a mistake and knock on the wrong door because you may get shot. This is what this country has come to. America is a violent country. Terrible.
Yeah, that is correct. Ralph is a 16-year-old junior at one of the schools in our Northland portion of Kansas City. On that day, he had was summoned to pick up his young siblings, twin brothers, at a house and mistakenly went to the wrong house. At that time, when he rang the doorbell, a gentleman emerged. Andrew Lester emerged, and he told him to leave, and he fired a shot and struck him in the head, and Ralph fell to the ground, and Lester, according to prosecutors, shot him again.
Hold that thought right there. He shot him in the head and then he shot him again. He wanted to kill him. He wasn't trying to injure him. He was trying to kill him.
Ralph struggled to several other houses where he finally was able to get help. Police came and took him to the hospital. So right now, the community is breathing a sigh of relief from what I've understand. But yet there's still some concerns about how this case was handled and what does this mean for children today? Just being able, if you knock on the wrong door, this could happen to you.
So I was just saying, think about all the times kids ring doorbells for a variety of reasons. How come he couldn't get help at the couple of other houses? Did they not?
Is she serious? Do you guys hear what she's saying? How come he couldn't get help? Why do you think he couldn't get help? I really can't. I really can't. This is liberal media, by the way. Completely out of touch. Completely out of touch.
Not answer the door. They wouldn't help them. They weren't home.
It was a combination of both. Sometimes they did not answer, or they refused to. In one case, when a person did help him, he told Ralph to lie on the ground with his hands behind his back. As unsettling as that may seem, a young man was shot, and he still has to more or less surrender himself to prove that he's not harmful.
Does she not realize that this is a Black boy? Does she not realize that? For her to actually ask that question. Look at how he was treated when he went to the other homes asking for help. He just told you, one of the homeowners told him to put his hands behind his back. He was already seen as a threat. And this is what you have to understand. When it comes to especially boys, everybody loves them when they're little. When they're 3 years old, they're 4 years old, they're 5 years old. Oh, he's so cute. You go to the mall and everybody wants to pat him on the head and pinch his little cheeks. Oh, he's so cute and so adorable. That goes away as they get older. As they get older, especially at his age, he's not seen as a boy. He's seen as a man, and they see him as a threat. And what this tells me about this commentator here who's asking this dumbass question, what that tells me about her is that even though she's on a liberal network, she is completely out of touch with what Black boys, Black men have to deal with in this country, how they are automatically seen as a threat. Most of the people in this country are asleep. I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter where you live. This is not just something that happens in Kansas City. It doesn't just happen in the South. It doesn't just happen in rural America. It happens in New England. It happens in New York City. It happens in LA. It happens in these so-called progressive cities like San Francisco. It happens all across the country because most of the Americans in this country are asleep. If they were awake after Joe Biden won, then most of the protesters out there protesting for George Floyd wouldn't have taken their asses back home. That's how you know most of them are asleep. Let's go on.
That could cause any type of harm.
Tell us, you mentioned it a moment ago about this criticism that charges were not filed early. There's been delay. There hasn't been information. What can you tell us?
As it stands right now, the prosecutors have charged him. There was some questions about whether he would be able to speak to authorities, but apparently he did speak to investigators on the night that he was shot. And then it took some time for prosecutors and crime teams to gather information and do specific type of testing to ensure that they had their case in order. So
the prosecutor did say there was a racial component to this, but he didn't go beyond that. What can you tell us?
Well, as you know, Ralph is is Black. The perpetrator in this case is white. Some would assume that because Ralph is Black and the gentleman who shot him is white, that there may have been some fear regarding, whether he could, cause any harm to him. But that seems to be the case. You have an emerging Black population that is moving to the north portion of our city, and in some cases that is unsettling to people who've been there for a very, very long time.
He just said the quiet part out loud. By the way, Kansas City is blue. They have a lot of Democrat representatives.
That's ridiculous. They're moving there because they want to be part of a safer community. What did they think? This young man was carrying a loaded saxophone. He's a model student. What can you tell us about Ralph? But also, what can you tell us about Andrew Lester, the 84-year-old who shot him? What do you know?
This woman is really not with it. She is really asleep as to how people view race in this country. She really is.
Know about these two men?
Well, as far as Andrew Lester, we know that he's 84 years old. He has been a resident of that community for quite some time. We don't know if he has any type of criminal background or what he did.
I know when I first saw the picture of this man's face, I thought if you put a wig on him, he reminds me of the character from Throw Mama from the Train. And I don't usually harp on like people's appearance, but in this case, I think I got a right to, because this guy is an absolute clown for him to shoot a kid in the head like that. Put a wig on him. I'm not kidding. If you've seen the movie Throw Mama from the Train, that's what he reminds me of.
For a living. We know that he has family in the area as well as elsewhere. Neighbors have told different media outlets that he's is well liked, well respected. People in that neighborhood say they look out for each other. Ralph, on the other hand, as I mentioned before, is a junior at a stately high school. By all accounts, an honor student, a kid who's well respected. He played bass clarinet. He had dreams of becoming an engineer with goals of wanting to attend Princeton when he graduated.
I was going to add, if you notice, he said that the people in that neighborhood, they look out for one another. Who are the people in the neighborhood? I mean, it seems like, because if you think about it, he had to run to multiple houses for someone to actually help him. They looking out for each other, all right.
Well, I hope he can still do that. Luckily, he is home and recovering, and we are sending him our very, very best.
She's asleep. Now, here's the other piece here, too, because before, they did show the protest. This is the other piece I want to tell you about, because this also happened in upstate New York. Similar situation where you have a young woman who pulled into a driveway, the wrong driveway, and she was shot. Now, she did not live. She died. Listen to this. This is what I'm telling you. This is what this country has come to. Woman, 20, fatally shot by upstate New York homeowner after pulling into the wrong driveway. Pulling into the wrong driveway. 20-year-old woman was shot dead by upstate New York homeowner Saturday after the driver of the car she was riding in turned into the wrong driveway. See, he didn't even shoot the driver. He shot the passenger. Her name was Kaylin Gillis from Saratoga County. She was inside the vehicle with 3 pals when they made a wrong turn into a driveway while searching for a friend's house in the town of Hebron. Now, this is coming from Washington County Sheriff's Office. As the driver of the car was leaving, the owner of the home, sorry, I read this. Oh, I did read right. As the driver of the car was leaving, Kevin Monahan, the owner of the home the group accidentally pulled up to, allegedly fired 2 shots from his patio at the vehicle. Gillis was struck by one of the bullets. Monahan, 65, was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. It's just, you can see the clip here.
Kaylin Gillis from Schuylerville, New York, at the Cemetery Road location. Talking to the other subjects that were there at Cemetery Road in the
Sorry about that. There we go.
Vehicle with Kaylin, they indicated that they had been looking for a friend's house in the Patterson Hill Road area and had gone to the scene where we had the report of shots fired. They had gone to the scene in error. They were looking for a friend's house, as I said, and unfortunately, they drove up this driveway. While they were leaving the residence, once they determined that they were at the wrong house, the subject came out on his porch for whatever reason and fired 2 shots, one of which struck the vehicle that Kaylin was in.
How many of you listening to this have been driving and maybe you needed to turn around? I've had to do this before where I've been at a dead end street and I had to turn around, and the only way to do that 3-point turn, you kind of end up turning into someone else's driveway, especially these streets that don't have sidewalks. So the driveway actually meets the street. So you end up turning around in someone else's driveway. This could have been you. That could have been me. Anyone who's done this before. And the homeowner took it upon himself to come outside. He took it upon himself to fire shots on them from his patio. I just don't understand. What was he afraid of? This is what happens when us as a society, we have been taught to fear our neighbor. We've been taught to fear each other. Oh, and by the way, that woman was white. Everybody's afraid of each other. Everybody. It's a terrible place. Terrible. Terrible. What happened to the days that my parents talk about, the time that they grew up in? What happened to the days where everybody in the neighborhood knows each other? Everybody greets people. People used to leave their doors unlocked at one point in time in this country. What happened to those days? Now you can't even ring the wrong doorbell. I don't have kids, but for those of you, if you do have kids, how does this make you feel? Does it make you feel safe to let your kid go knock on doors to sell candy bars? What about going trick-or-treating? Do you feel safe letting your kid do that now? And some loony comes to the door and shoots them? Something has to change in this country, man. This country never fully got to a place of healing. Never fully did. There's a lot of bitterness. There's a lot of anger. There's a lot of frustration. And then to go along with that, you have mainstream media to add to that. Fear your neighbor, they say. Fear your neighbor and trust the politicians. Isn't that something? When the politicians are the real crooks. Well. Thank you so much for the super sticker, Aberdeen. We're going to hear more about this story as time goes by. Red Todd said it's okay when cops go to the wrong house. They said so themselves. This is a good thing to bring up. What about those times when police officers have gone to the wrong house and they've killed the wrong person? Dana says this reminds me of how long it took the police to arrest George Zimmerman after he murdered Trayvon Martin. Thank you for the super chat, Laugh66. The shooter here will not be called a shooter by MSM because MSM lies on a daily basis on behalf of racist media that likes to make excuses for the better off. And thank you for the super chat, Roger Meadows. Sounds like Renisha McBride, 2013 of Dearborn, Michigan. You go. And thank you for the super chat as well, Laugh66. People outside the U.S. marvel at the passivity of the U.S. population in the face of gun violence that kills innocents daily. Are the U.S. population ever going to rise up? Does not seem so. Desert Mantis, austerity has taken its toll, Sabby. Very sad. I like to get you to look at the big picture, which is the fact that we are afraid of each other. That's what it's come to.